But I believe that since Trump has come into office, he's making China number one.
一位替白宫服务了整整20年的美国顶级军事智囊亲口说出了让全美鹰派石化的一句话：这场美伊战争是送给中国的天大礼物。说这话的是芝加哥大学政治学教授罗伯特·佩普，他的著作《轰炸制胜至今》是美国空军的必读教材。他更是过去20年里白宫军事与反恐政策的核心顾问，而另一边是那批叫嚣着要对伊朗动武的美国鹰派政客，是那个把全球搅得天翻地覆的特朗普政府。这帮西方战略精英一直有一套说法，说什么对伊朗开战是在掐断中国的石油命脉，说什么油价一涨，中国的制造业就要垮掉，说什么这场战争是在逼习近平瑟瑟发抖，逼中国乖乖回到谈判桌上向特朗普低头。他们把自己的如意算盘打得叮当响，以为美国的炸弹一落，全世界都要跪下来求饶，没想到就是他们最信任的那个核心智囊在亲赴中国考察2个星期之后回来，说出了一句让所有人窒息的话：美国正在亲手把自己送进战略死胡同，而中国正在对着这一切暗暗狂喜。就在美军把最珍贵的远程精准武器一枚一枚地砸进中东的火坑，中国的武汉已悄悄长出了一个机器人吸骨中国的工厂，让这位美国智囊看得目瞪口呆，感叹连连。他亲口说，不是中国在为伊朗忧虑，而是美国正以令人心惊的速度把世界第一的位置拱手相让。让我们来看佩普教授究竟说出了哪些让华盛顿不敢播的真话。
A quite famous prediction, Professor. You predicted in 2009 that America's era as the world's only superpower was ending.
Oh, yes, and I think that is true. We haven't talked about China, but I believe that since Trump has come into office, he's making China number one. His tariffs have done nothing but help China. China's been on charm offensive since the tariffs have been, and they're picking up all the pieces. I was just spent 2 weeks in China in June while we were bombing Iran. I said I had to learn how to do social media. I toured advanced industries in China for 2 solid weeks. One of the most amazing visits, trips I've ever had in my whole career. And it was stunning. So, Stephen, since COVID, almost nobody has gone to China. Now, if they have, they've gone to Beijing or Shanghai. They haven't gone to Wuhan. They haven't gone to Shenzhen, visited the BYD electric car factories, seen the robots that are now doing the metallurgy. And you can't see it very well on the web because China's keeping it to themselves. They don't want to brag about it. They're motoring ahead. So Wuhan, to give you an example, Wuhan is kind of like Pittsburgh. It's a bigger version of Pittsburgh. It's an old steel area. That's not Wuhan today. Wuhan today is the AI. It's developing not just a robotic company. They're uplifting 9 million people in Wuhan. Their medicine is improved. Their infrastructure is improved. They have more construction jobs than ever before because they have to build so much to uplift the whole 9 million people. This is what Pittsburgh should have been and hasn't been. And I know, I'm from Western Pennsylvania. It's heartbreaking to me to watch what's happened to Pittsburgh over the last 30 or 40 years. Wuhan, exactly the same trajectory, an old steel city, is now one of the leaders here they have a robotic Silicon Valley there that I visited, and so forth.
And why does this matter? Why does it matter if the US are no longer the world superpower? What then does history tell us is the consequence of that?
The consequence is, first of all, you get enormous tension here for violence. So when you see big hegemonic shifts, that means when one leader, the world's number one, becomes replaced by another, bad things happen. This is what happened, how you got the wars between Britain and France. When they were fighting their wars, this is how you got essentially World War I, because of the rise and fall of Germany versus Russia versus Britain. So these rising and fall, they make a huge difference. Doesn't always happen. The one time it was peaceful was when America replaced Britain as number one. So just think about that. But other times have been very tense.
So how does China feel that the US are now at war with the Middle East?
So what's interesting is to get ready for coming on here, I listened to the All In podcast, and I hope that's okay to talk about somebody else's podcast.
I love that show.
I think they're brilliant, by the way. I love it. But what they said, just in the most recent, is that Trump's playing a game for China. What they said is China's shaking in its boots, and that what this is about is it's kind of Venezuela plus Iran is all about to cause Xi to be shaking in his boots in April, so that he will somehow make some bigger deal with Trump. I think this is just wrong. I think that it may be that there's some, China does absolutely buy 90% of Iran's oil. We're not disagreeing with the facts of the matter. It's the interpretation and the consequences for who's going to be number one down the road. So my assessment here is China is probably thrilled that we're on the verge of getting into another quagmire in the Middle East, and that they would gladly give up. They have about 20% of their GDP energy, not GDP, 20% of their energy, it's a much smaller fraction of their GDP that turns on the oil issue. Most of their energy is not generated through oil. And so I think they would really, if they had to give all of the Middle Eastern oil up to suck us in to another forever war with Iran that would go on for years and years, oh my goodness gracious, because they see themselves as growing through Asia and spreading their wings through Asia. And so to get us pinned down in the Middle East with an even bigger problem than we had with Iraq, this is manna from heaven for China. That's what I saw when I was there. If
I was Putin, or if I was running China, based on everything you've said and based on everything I know, I would really want this war to go on for a long time.
Oh, for sure.
I'd really be helping Iran, prolong this thing. And also because Russia are in their own situation at the moment with Ukraine. So it's quite a distraction from whatever Putin's objectives are in Ukraine. No one's really talking about Ukraine this week.
And it's bad for the Ukrainians, because what's happening is by the little bit that Putin has gotten himself involved here, there is a chance he set the stage for a deal, which is, again, America stops the intel to the Ukrainians if Russia will stop the intel to Iran. That is much, much, much to Putin's advantage with Ukraine. So I think that you have a situation here, Stephen, where Putin, it's not so much he's itching to get in the fight, is he's trying to do it in ways that he gets something out of it in his relations war with Ukraine. Think about that with President Xi. I don't think the Chinese want to get in the fight. I think, in fact, right now, if I'm assessing this correctly, they're probably not wanting to get in the way of an enemy who's shooting himself in both feet. Yeah. So right now, America's damaging itself a lot more than China could. And if China inserts itself, there's a very good chance then that would help Trump, again, pull a rabbit out of a hat. I don't think they want to do that. I think right now, you just look at this we're running out of what's called standoff PGMs. Remember Secretary Hegseth said, well, yeah, okay, we're running out of standoff PGMs, but we're going to do something from the bombs that we can drop more over country. Well, that's a problem for Taiwan. If we're going to defend Taiwan, we've got to do this with long standoff precision weapons. And everybody who studies this knows that. So if we're really running low on standoff precision weapons, Xi's just licking his chops saying, my goodness, how much better does this get?
If Trump was listening, probably not the case. I think he just watches CNN and Fox News. But if Trump was listening, what would you say to him?
What I would tell him is take the deal. I would say stop right now and do everything possible to go back to the deal you rejected the day before you started bombing. And what your goal should be is to get as much of the 60% enriched uranium out of the country as possible. If you could also get the 20% enriched uranium out, that would be good too. But you're probably not going to get as good a deal because the supreme leader you were dealing with is gone. And you now have a much tougher, so you might have to accept President Trump a worse deal.
Are we just kicking the can down the road here? Because if you're an Iranian, like you've said, you've watched bombs drop, you've realized that the reason why you are such a target is because you don't have these nuclear weapons. So is there not an element where Iran getting nuclear weapons is inevitable in some way?
So, Stephen, this is the myth of 100% security. So we see this in not just America, but in lots of conflicts in history, where the idea that you don't have 100% security leads you to essentially do things that look like suicide for fear of death. So we know that there is a long-term problem out there, and sometimes a really good solution is to freeze it for 20 years. Just freeze it for 20 years. And you know what? You're right. You didn't permanently take it off the table. But if you can freeze a problem for 20 years, that's actually you might get lucky. You might get something good, like the Soviet Union might just fall apart on you. Out of the blue, it might just fall apart on you. And not because you did anything, it's just because something else changed in the world. So the way to think about this, Stephen, is not this idea that we're going to take an action and have 100% security. This is how big powers lose wars. Big powers are up against these little countries. And think about how often they lose. We lose to Vietnam. That's how I got into this business in the first place. I wanted to understand that. And so this idea of the search for perfect security is often getting us into trouble. Kick a can down. You're right. It's only 20 years. I'll take that. That's better than where we are right now.
Professor Robert Pape, of all the things that we've talked about,
which has been a wonderful conversation, by the way.
And very diverse, but really focused on this subject of what's going on in the world at the moment with Iran and Trump and America's decline. What is the thing that we should have talked about that we didn't talk about?
The big thing, well, we're finally getting to it at the end, is the real consequence of what President Trump has done since coming into office. The real consequence of the tariffs, the real consequence of not just threatening discussion of Greenland, but becoming very aggressive with our European allies on Greenland, being very aggressive to the point of taking out a leader from Venezuela, which is in our Western hemisphere. So it's creating, what this is really doing is it's threatening America's primacy. So I am a big believer that America should be the strongest, most secure state on the planet. I think that is good for us. That means that it is valuable to be the top dog, to be the number one strongest economic military power. But in order to do that, you have to be the world's number one economy for real. And with $40 trillion in debt, with us pushing away our trading partners, with us engaging in hostile actions here, which are scaring the rest of the world to further drift away from us and maybe not side with China, but be neutral. Oh, my goodness gracious. And again, as I said before, China is motoring ahead on the AI revolution. We're talking AI. But are we really doing Wuhan? Are we up to Wuhan? I think it would be interesting for folks to go to Wuhan and actually visit, or go to Shenzhen and visit, or go to Hangzhou and visit and see where Alibaba is, and see that it's not just one company here. It's not just DeepSeek. That there's clusters that are being built that are uplifting 10 million people at a swath. And my goodness, why aren't we doing that in America? We certainly need that in the Rust Belt.
We're too distracted.
We're too distracted, which is what I'm trying to say is to China's advantage. And I think this is the real long-term price, which is, are we actually eroding our position as the world's number one? And I think our primacy is in danger.
Professor Robert Pape, we have a closing tradition on this podcast where the last guest leaves a question for the next guest, not knowing who they're leaving it for. The question left for you is, what is the prediction you have for the future that most people do not want to hear?
Well, this is going to lead into the conversation. So I have a book coming out in September called Our Own Worst Enemies. As bad as all this problem is, Stephen, as bad as it is, I have spent the last several years focusing on what's happening with political violence in the United States and its normalization. And the biggest danger that we face, even bigger than Iran, and all the problems we've just talked about is the normalization of political violence in our own country.
And by political violence, you mean?
I'm talking about in the last 10 years, we have seen a surge of violent riots. We have seen a surge of political assassinations that we haven't seen since the 1960s. On top of that, we've just had Operation Midway Blitz in my city, Chicago. That is the surge of militarized immigration enforcement,
ICE.
which surged into neighborhoods over almost 300 times.
Crazy.
Not just a small. And then what happened after they left Chicago is they did even more of that in Minneapolis. So this trajectory, Stephen, that we're on, where we are seeing the incredible normalization of political violence, and it's happening on both the right and the left. I'm not trying to make moral equivalence, but it is, and the book will explain this, is probably the greatest danger that we face, because if we are our own worst enemies, think of what that means for us being that great power that is so important for us and the great future we want for our families and our communities here. We are in danger of becoming our own worst enemies, not for a day, not for a month, but for years.
Professor, thank you so much. If anyone wants to go and read more about many of the things we've talked about today, where do they go? Substack? I'll link.
I would go. You can read my books on it. You can get them from Amazon. I would go to Substack, and that's The Escalation Trap. And I would also just be aware that there will be more discussion of political violence. So it's not just political violence abroad, and it's not just political violence at home. It is both happening at the same time.
看完佩普教授的这场深度访谈，说实话，我心里有一种说不清楚的感受，不是得意，而是看透棋局之后的那种沉静，就像看着对手一边喊着我要赢了，一边亲手把车马炮全部送光。美国鹰派的那套逻辑我们都听过，参议员汤姆·科顿信誓旦旦地说，油价一涨，中国制造业的成本优势就消失了。众议院外委会主席麦考尔也说，打掉伊朗就等于切断了一带一路的大动脉，中国几百亿美元的基建投资就会毁于一旦。这套说法听起来头头是道，但在我们眼里，这恰恰是一种典型的认知失调。他们把战术层面的账本盈亏硬生生包装成了战略层面的胜负判断，然后拼命说服自己这一仗打对了。我们不妨打个比方，这就像两家工厂在竞争，你花了一大笔钱，把对手的原材料供应商搅乱了，对手确实要多花一点钱进货，但就在这个时候，你自己工厂的机器在燃烧，你最精锐的生产线在空转，你的全球订单正被客户悄悄转走，请问谁才是这场竞争真正的输家？佩普教授在访谈中非常清楚地说，中国采购了伊朗 90% 的石油，这是事实，没有人否认。但他紧接着指出，中国整体能源结构里，石油所占的比例其实是一个相当小的数字，因为我们大量依靠煤电、核电以及快速增长的新能源，更何况中国手里握着约9亿桶的战略石油储备，分散能源来源和加速新能源替代，这才是应对油价冲击真正的护城河。这些损失是完全可以对冲的。而美国那边呢，国防部长自己都公开承认，美军的防区外精准制导武器正在以惊人的速度耗尽。要知道，所有研究台海局势的学者都心里清楚，美军在印太方向最核心的威慑能力，恰恰建立在这些远程精准武器之上。现在，这些武器一枚一枚地落在伊朗的土地上，美国在整个印太地区的军事存在就一点一点地出现了真空。这种损耗不是靠加班加点能补回来的，这是一种不可逆的系统性消耗。是任何账本都无法弥补的战略空洞，这就是路径依赖最可怕的地方。20年前，美国用同样的理由杀进了阿富汗，杀进了伊拉克，在帝国坟场里流尽了鲜血。20年后，这帮西方战略精英依然故我走上了同一条路，因为对他们来说，承认战略错误的政治代价，比继续犯错更让他们难以承受。这就是一个大国走下坡路时最危险的心理陷阱。而在他们争论的这段时间里，佩普教授在武汉看到了什么？他说，武汉今天不是那个老钢铁城，武汉今天是人工智能，是机器人，是一个正在拔地而起的机器人溪谷，900万武汉人。医疗在升级，基建在升级，科技就业在爆炸性增长。他说， 这是匹兹堡本应走上而没有走上的路。说这话的时候，这位来自宾夕法尼亚的美国教授语气里带着掩不住的心疼与惋惜。这让我深深地想到，每一次大国更迭的历史都是同一个剧本的重演，一个旧霸主试图用武力维持秩序，另一个新力量用发展本身完成超越，不是靠炸弹，不是靠封锁，而是靠一座座升起的工厂，一行行写下的代码，一个个被带离贫困的普通人。我们深知就在2015年到2021年这短短6年，中国消除了近1亿人的绝对贫困，这是人类历史上从未有过的壮举。而佩普教授说的对，美国唯一一次和平完成霸主交接是靠着真实的实力说话，从英国手中接过接力棒，今天这个接力棒正在换手。历史的车轮从不等待任何人，当对手一次次把炸弹砸向别人的土地，而我们一次次把工厂建在自己的土地，当对手深陷帝国的泥潭难以自拔，而我们保持着发展的定力与内部的稳定。答案其实早已写在墙上了，在乱世之中，谁能埋头办好自己的事，谁就是笑到最后的那一个。时间永远站在我们这一边。